All right, we're going to be reading an article here today. I know this is the first video I've put out in a while of like just me recording for a YouTube video. I've been posting a lot on TikTok, been posting a lot of the podcast clips and episodes here on YouTube. But yeah, here's just an old-fashioned YouTube video. And the reason I wanted to do this one is because of this article here, that if you guys listen to the podcast a couple episodes ago, me and Jacob went through this. You know, Jacob, he had found it a few weeks prior, wanted to share it on the podcast, kind of have me live react to it. And since the episode is aired and since I've listened back to it, you know, in editing and everything, I just have a lot of thoughts that I'd like to expand on in regards to this article, because my opinion has become a lot more firm, I guess, like a lot more rock solid than it was while we were doing the episode. Because, you know, in the moment, it was while recording, it was just kind of hard to fully process it. These trades he was throwing at me, you know, I didn't have the article in front of me or anything. It was just him reading. But yeah, I just wanted to talk more about it, I guess. So it's an article from Bleacher Report. Well, this says it's Grant Hughes. I thought the one we recorded an episode for was from Greg Schwartz. At least that's what Jacob said. But I thought that, like, when you read the title, it was literally this: 5 NBA offseason trades that can still happen. At least I'm pretty sure that's what I remember it being. So let's see if they're different. I was get their man in the middle. Yes, this is different. But I do like this one right here at the top, just based on Clint Capella going to the Mavericks, because that would be a very good pairing for Luka Doncic to, you know, with Clint Capella. But on the Hawks side of things, it's kind of weird because they just gave up John Collins, because, you know, they did have Clint Capella and John Collins, two roll to the rim lob threat guys, you know, that being their strength, kind of getting in each other's way here on the Hawks. Now they got rid of John Collins, so that's like only Clint Capella's job, and I guess a little bit like Onyeka Okongwu as well, but mainly Clint Capella. And so it just feels weird for the Hawks to get rid of Clint Capella after they just got off of John Collins. So yeah, let me try to find the actual article. Okay, I think I found it. It's actually called Realistic NBA Offseason Trades That Can Still Happen, not 5 NBA offseason trades that can still happen. Rather confusing. But yeah, so looking through these, now that we have it, the first trade that he has outlined is titled Tyus Jones Answers Bulls Point Guard Problem. This is one that I had a problem with right off the bat, and still very much do, just because of when I think of the Bulls, and again, I said this on the episode, and that still rings true, of I'm not sure if this is like a very common narrative around the Bulls fan base, like on Bulls Reddit, if like what they're talking about is their number one need being a point guard. I could maybe see that. That doesn't sound unbelievable or ridiculous to me. But if I were just to quick, you know, look at this roster, what the Bulls are in my head, think about what their main issues are, I'd say there might be a couple, maybe at least one that's bigger than this one. And that directly had, like, Patrick Williams is the only thing that is filling that spot and like solving that issue, which is their big wing defense. Really just the size on the wings and defense in general. So that's kind of two problems lumped into one, lumped into one player. One player is solving both those. Not solving, I shouldn't say solving, but he is certainly helping cover up those issues the best he can, I guess. And the lineup, I guess he probably has it written here because that's where Jacob read it off of. Bulls looked like one of the best teams in the East last time Lonzo Ball played, yet the veteran point guard is likely to miss another full season due to knee injury. Chicago helped cover for his absence with the signing of Javon Carter. Yeah, see, I wasn't even thinking of Javon Carter. I was just, in my head, I was thinking of Alex Caruso, of Ayo Dosunmu, of Kobe White. Just to me, you have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan that are both like really capable primary ball handlers. And so having some solid rotational point guards, just a couple of those, honestly, should be enough for what, you know, this Bulls team is trying. You know, it's enough to solve that issue to the point that it is no longer a bigger issue than what they have going on down at the 4 spot, 4 and 5 and big 3, you know, that spot. To me, it just seems like less of an issue, but that's just me. DeRozan, being a really good playmaker, can definitely have the ball in his hands most times. If not, really just need a guy to bring up the ball and, you know, hit DeRozan when he's coming off some action to get open and then, like, you know, get into the offense. So you just need a guy to bring up the ball and do that. And I'd say Alex Caruso gives you that. Javon Carter gives you that. Kobe White honestly probably gives you a little bit more than that. Not a ton from like the playmaking side, I guess, but definitely some like off the dribble creation at least. But yeah, Jones was previously dealt this offseason to Washington in a 3-team deal that landed Marcus Smart with the Memphis Grizzlies and Kristaps Porzingis in Boston with the Celtics. The 27-year-old would be wasted with the rebuilding Wizards, however, and could make a real difference in Chicago's overall success success as their new starting floor general. See, like, I don't necessarily disagree with this. And like, this feels like a move that was not made, but a move that was thought up by the author of this article, just from the premise of like as a basketball fan or basketball junkie, I don't like the idea of Tyus Jones being wasted in Washington. So let's try to get him to a team that he would work on, and not really thinking about it from the standpoint of like why the Bulls would do this. You know what I mean? I'm like, this definitely isn't a move that like would completely, it would be surprising to me if this happened, but it wouldn't be like the most crazy thing that's ever happened, and most crazy trade, most surprising trade that has ever happened. I'm not saying that it would be, but it would definitely, I would probably bet on this not happening for the reason of like, unless they had some other way to acquire somebody to fill that Patrick Williams spot, because I believe, at least this is what Jacob said. I don't know if he says it in here or not, but he believes that Corey Kispert will be the person to fill in that Patrick Williams spot, which for some reason, apparently Basketball Reference has Corey Kispert listed as bigger height and weight wise than Patrick Williams. It has Corey Kispert at 6'7", 220 and Patrick Williams at 6'7", 215. I don't really buy Corey Kispert being quite 6'7", or just being the same size as Patrick Williams is all I'm trying to say. And I see more Patrick Williams more as like a 6'7", 6'8" type of wing. Corey Kispert, I think of in my head more like a 6'6" to 6'5" even. So not really the same positionally, and like not even close to the same type of skill set as a defender or like athleticism and all that. So not really the same role, not really the same type of player. Jones averaged 16.4 points, 4.0 rebounds, 8.1 assists, and 1.8 steals in his 22 starts with the Grizzlies last season, all while putting up efficient 50, 41.5, 77.8 percentile shooting splits. Kispert was one of the NBA's best three-point shooters, 42.4% on 2.2 makes per game, bringing some much-needed outside shooting to a Bulls team that ranked dead last in made threes per night. Starting lineup with Tyus Jones, Zach LaVine, Corey Kispert, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic could make some noise in the East. See, this is the line that I really wanted to talk about this specific point in the article for. This sentence is just wild to me, because they're like, what is their defensive rating going to be? Like is it going to be upwards of 122? This might be the worst defense in the league if this is what you're rolling out as a starting lineup. Like, I guess if this was their roster, then, and Torrey Craig is a recent addition. I did see that earlier. So he helps fill that Patrick Williams spot from more of a reserve perspective. You probably don't want Torrey Craig starting, just because he's not that level of player really, unless you have a really good lineup around him, at which point, you're just throwing him in as a defensive specialist who's not really even that great of a defender, I might add. Like, he's good on defense, but he's nowhere special. Like, it feels weird to call him a specialist, you know what I mean? Because he's not like a defensive savant or something like that. So, a lot of defensive players here on the bench, well, I should say 3, with Alex Caruso, Torrey Craig, and Javon Carter. Coby White, I think, is probably, he's definitely capable of being a positive defender. I'm not sure though where he's been at. Like, I think his last season was better than his previous seasons in terms of his defensive performance, but I'm not sure if it's quite in the positive yet, but it definitely could be. And then Andre Drummond, definitely a negative on the defensive end in most contexts, so not really helping a ton out there. Like, I just feel like having Caruso at point, or even Javon Carter or Coby White, and then having Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic is the Bulls' best lineup, or the best bet. I'm not saying that's necessarily, like, it's just this lineup does not work defensively. So I just don't see it happening for that reason, I guess. And then the second move is Knicks add shooting with Bojan Bogdanovic. So the Knicks receive Bojan Bogdanovic. Detroit receives Evan Fournier, 2024 first round pick, top 10 protected. So yeah, that's it. And that was my qualm with it when we recorded the episode, was that I don't see Bojan Bogdanovic getting shipped off from Detroit for this kind of a return. I think that there's going to be a team out there at some point this year that's willing to give up at least a little bit more than Evan Fournier, who at this point is really just salary filler, and a top 10 protected pick. And it's, yeah, 2024 from the Knicks. So it's very likely, it's not even in the lottery. So, which means that you would get it, which is a positive, but still not like tremendous value compared to what I feel like you could get in a deal for Bojan if they waited till the deadline. Like, this move is almost guaranteed not to happen until the deadline, because I feel like Detroit's viewpoint on it is probably like, they got a lot of veterans on this roster now heading into, hopefully, Cade's first really full healthy season of his career so far, and got these veterans around him, hopefully make a play-in push in the East. And like at the deadline, if they aren't reaching those aspirations, or maybe even if they are, because maybe they want to stay as competitive as possible even at that point, because once they get into the play-in, we just saw 2 play-in teams go to the conference finals and one of them go to the finals. So maybe that makes teams more willing to try to compete for those spots. But what I was going to say was, though, I think that you would see Bojan Bogdanovic probably moved at the deadline if the Pistons are not meeting, are not really in the play-in chase. If things didn't break right for the Pistons this season, then at the deadline, there's going to be some teams, probably at least some contenders out there, like a Lakers, like, somebody right on the cusp of making a championship contending type of run, and want to just get a piece to really like secure them in that spot. I think you could definitely see maybe even a couple first round picks being thrown around into a trade for Bojan Bogdanovic, just because he gives you like elite shooting and like a really steady, solid option for like a ball handler and like weak side pick and roll. And he's always been a pretty solid defender as well. Now that he's getting up there in years, he might be slipping a little bit on that end, but I don't think it's anywhere close to being a disaster yet. That's for sure. But yeah, so not a huge fan of that one. Well, it's not like, I shouldn't say fan of, I just don't feel like that sounds very realistic. I don't really see that happening. And so the third one, we got Hawks acquire Raptors star not named Pascal Siakam. Oh, I just assumed Jacob said that. I didn't know that that was actually the name of the article section. And so, the Hawks obviously receive OG Anunoby. The Raptors receive AJ Griffin, DeAndre Hunter, a 2024 first from the Kings, and then 2 second-round picks in the future. And yeah, so this was another one that, listening back, I was like, I really should have thought about the return more. I wasn't even really thinking about the Raptors' point of view. I was only focused on the Hawks' point of view, because that's what Jacob was focused on. Jacob didn't think that it was like that great of a move for the Hawks. And so I just went on like the trying to explain why the Hawks would do that deal, because I definitely see the appeal for the Hawks side of things, wanting to improve that starting lineup around Trae Young in the defensive category for sure. Jacob said in that episode like that OG Anunoby doesn't really fill the John Collins spot. And it's like, yeah, not really. They're not the same type of player. But if anybody's listened to me talk about the Hawks over the past several years now, probably over 2 at least, I've always had an issue with their roster building, their roster construction. And one part of like main piece of that was the fit of John Collins with this roster. I liked John Collins in there all the way up until the point where they traded for Clint Capella, because, John Collins was just this great pair with Trae Young as a lob threat in the pick and roll game. And then they bring in another lob threat and even more of a strict, like that's the only thing he can bring on the offensive end as far as Clint Capella goes, like is a pick and roll lob threat and like maybe a guy that can do some dribble handoffs, which is basically the same type of thing. So because in dribble handoffs, it's like a pick and roll, the ball just starts in the roller's hands essentially. But I didn't love the fit of John Collins with Clint Capella, because that takes John Collins out of his element in a way, out of his strength, especially with how Clint Capella is a complete non-shooter. So he's clogging up the spacing. So that forced John Collins to evolve. At first, that's why I was like, this is a terrible fit. Like, why even have them both? It's just, I didn't love it. There's a lot of other reasons why I didn't like the Hawks roster construction. It wasn't just this. If you want to hear more on that, I think it's episode 4, I want to say, of the podcast. Well, one of the first episodes that we did as Hoop Theory. That episode is basically all about that. And it's one of the most listened, I think it is by far actually the most listened to episode out of our whole catalog or whatever. So if you haven't heard that or watched it on YouTube, it's on both. Go check that out. But anyways, so yeah, John Collins actually evolved to fit. Like, I think John Collins is really underrated how much he's done to actually fit in that Hawks ecosystem, because he actually started becoming a reliable 3-point shooter. He became actually somewhat mobile and like decent as a perimeter defender, when like those things were like some of his biggest negatives early on in his career. And so he changed himself into like literally the spot that you need alongside those pieces that were around him in that offense, which is what OG Anunoby is, a 3-and-D wing. On the offensive end, he's more of a spot up shooter that can handle the ball in some spots, so on and so forth. So in a way, OG Anunoby does fill the John Collins spot, because for what John Collins needed to provide to the Hawks, as far as their starting lineup goes, was really what OG Anunoby does a lot better. But that's not what you think of John Collins as, because those aren't his strengths necessarily. It's just things that he was forced to do. So yeah, that's why I like it from Atlanta's side of things. The reason I don't like it from the Raptors side of things is because there's no way, like, this is just like we were talking about at the deadline last year, it was being thrown around deals almost like to the level of the Drew Holiday return from, the Bucks Pelicans trade. Like, this is nowhere close to that. But but like a deal with up to 4 first-round picks around some, salary and young players, like a massive return, is what the Raptors are looking for, and what seems like there are some teams that are at least borderline, like they're flirting with being willing to do. As we heard in the rumor mill with the Grizzlies last season, that move was definitely a move that was scaring me as a Nuggets fan, was the Grizzlies if they would have made that move to get OG Anunoby at the deadline, and that included at least 3, but I think it might have been even 4 first-round picks. So yeah, that's why I don't really see that happening for like this return is not lofty enough. AJ Griffin and DeAndre Hunter on the Raptors, like what are they really worth? They're like a carbon copy of 4 or 5 other players already there. So see, and this, if the Hawks can't convince the Raptors to give up Pascal Siakam, getting Anunoby in return is a terrific consolation prize. I don't think very many teams view Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby very differently in terms of what the return is going to be, like what their value is going to be for the highest suitors, I guess. Pascal Siakam in a vacuum, a more valuable player for sure, brings more to the table. OG Anunoby is like the perfect piece in a way to finish out a lot of like these contending teams' rosters. He would be like the piece to add to finish it or to put it over the top, because he fills a very, very useful, valuable role, and also the age factor as well, him being at least decently younger than Pascal Siakam is. So, and then trade 4 is Cat creates big 3 in Dallas. Wolves build around Anthony Edwards. Yeah, see, this is the thing that I had the problem with in the episode, and I definitely still agree with now, is but Christian Wood, sign and trade. Okay. I was going to say he's not under contract. Like, I know that Cat, this kind of opens a topic that I wanted to talk about at some point on the podcast. We still might, but the whole narrative around the Timberwolves is Cat needs to be traded, really. Like, that's the move that needs to be made. And I understand that from the standpoint of like, because of how much they gave up just like last year to get Gobert, they feel like it's not an option to now just move on from Gobert a year later and trade him once again. I disagree with that philosophy, because it's like you can't hold on to things like that and think about like, oh, if I do this, then it shows that our trade was a failure. Everybody knows the trade was a failure. There should be nobody left like trying to convince themselves that it wasn't a pretty massive negative deal for them. Like, you just need to keep your eyes on the future. Like, what is the best move you can make now and like to improve your team the best way? To me, just stylistically, I really prefer the fit of Anthony Edwards and Cat more so. Not that I'm a big Cat fan. I'm not at all, honestly, but at least he fits with Anthony Edwards, I think, better, because like Anthony Edwards is one of the few guys, I shouldn't say few, but one of those guys in the league that I think the more space that's out on the floor, the better, really. So like if I have Anthony Edwards on my team, I really would avoid rolling out a non-shooter at the same time on the court. Like, I would really lean on or favor towards the guys that can shoot to be on the floor with Anthony Edwards, just because like I want to give him an open runway. I want to give him as much space as possible to blow past defenders and get to the rim. And, there being a lot less or a lot more room or floor to cover for rotating defenders to, slide over and help. When Gobert's on the floor, it just changes the whole geometry of the court. It becomes a lot different. And if Anthony Edwards was like a very skilled pick and roll playmaker that, could mix in some lobs and like, if he was like Luka Doncic, which is what I'm trying to get to in a second, but, if he had that skill set to him as well, then I could see the appeal of rolling him out on the floor with Gobert offensively. But because he doesn't really have that, I don't know what's happening to my screen right now, but not to say he's a bad playmaker or anything like that, but he's not like that kind of a playmaker with Gobert in the pick and roll. So Cat, obviously one of the best shooting big men in NBA history, not going to feed into, his ego with how it's just weird to me. I'm not going to get into a whole Cat thing on how weird he is, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But Luka with Gobert, if you had to pick one player in the NBA from a Gobert perspective, like who is the number one star in the league that you would want to fit or to pair with Gobert, Luka might be the first pick. Probably is, to be honest. Luka, Trae Young, just James Harden, but not really now as much, but I think you get the idea. The heliocentric pick and roll creator that, you're just going to run high screen and roll every play. And it's like pick your poison for the defense, because Luka can score at will in the pick and roll. And if defense shades over to him too much, then he has Gobert as a lob threat. One of the best lob passers in the world to one of the best, or, among the best lob finishers in the world. That would be a deadly offensive duo. And that would be the most, I'd say that'd be by far the most valuable Gobert has ever been offensively, would be in a situation like that. He's never really had that. And he provides so much for Dallas. It seems like this Greg Schwartz guy doesn't care about defense at all when building a roster, because putting Cat on the Mavs with and trading away Tim Hardaway Jr., which I guess isn't, providing insane defensive help, but at least not one of the weak points of the defense. You're putting 3 weak defenders out there with Towns, Luka Doncic, and Kyrie Irving. If those 3 are on the court together, it's going to be really hard to have 2 other players to try to make up for that defensive liability, those defensive liabilities. I think I said on the podcast, maybe if the other 2 players on the court are prime Hakeem Olajuwon and prime Scottie Pippen, then I would maybe consider it. So this just kind of surprised me that, before earlier in this article, it seemed like Greg Schwartz was just trying to, he was kind of being a fantasy basketball build, building the teams just the way they fits the best. It appeals to him as a basketball fan or basketball junkie more so than the team perspective. This one is the opposite of that. And I don't understand it, why he would do that. I'm not saying that this is the reason I don't like this one is different than the other one so far, because I actually would say this is just as likely, if not more likely, than the trade I made up as a counter to this, to trade Gobert instead of Cat to the Mavs. Also, I don't think he understands what stars go for nowadays in trades. This is not a trade that would happen. It's just not. The only parts of this trade that make sense for the what they're trying to get is Jaden Hardy, kind of, and the pick. Yeah, that exactly up the alley what they want. But I guarantee you that if a Cat deal is made, there are at least going to be multiple first round picks. At least multiple. Probably upwards of 3. Just judging based on what deals happen now. The deals that have happened the past 3 or 4 years. If a star is getting traded, no matter how good of a star he is, if he is a star, there is going to be a slew of picks. So this is just kind of a pipe dream from Mavericks perspective. This is just throwing together their pocket change. So yeah, I don't see that one happening. I don't like this trade for the reason that I just said about it doesn't fit as basketball junkie preferences or whatever, but also it doesn't work in terms of logistics. This is not the return that would happen. I just guarantee you. Maybe Gobert, maybe. But again, I don't really see Tim Connelly and the Wolves front office saying yes to a deal like this, where it's just the return that they get for Gobert is so small compared to what they gave up for him just a year ago. But like I said, I think you just need to ignore that. You have to move on. I know there's probably going to be a lot of TV segments and memes about just showing the comparison between what the packages were and how terrible of a move it was for the Wolves. But you just got to do what you have to do. You can't just be stubborn with it and try to cover it up in a way. And so this 5th trade, Lillard to the Heat, Harden to the Clippers, and 14 blockbuster. So the Heat received Damian Lillard and Marcus Morris Sr. The Clippers received James Harden and PJ Tucker. The Sixers received Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Robert Covington, 2028 and 2029 second round picks. And then the Blazers get unprotected firsts in 27 and 29, as well as 28 and 30. And those ones are from the Clippers. And then they get Kyle Lowry, Nick Batum, Nikola Jovic, Kobe Brown, Amir Coffey, and Jason Preston. See, and this is the most realistic of all the trades so far, I think. If anybody were to say no to this trade, it would have to be the Sixers. But depending on how bad things get with James Harden, maybe this does happen. I don't know. But the thing is, I don't see Daryl Morey giving into a deal that doesn't have any first round picks for James Harden and PJ Tucker, giving up both of them, 2 of his beloved assets. So yeah, I don't totally see this one happening, but I think it's more probable or more plausible, I guess, than most of these other ones. So yeah, I guess just wanted to talk about this more because on the episode, I feel like I just did not grasp in full how bad of an article I think that this actually is, which I think it is quite bad. I would say. There's not a single trade in this article that I don't have any problems with. And a few of them have quite a few. So yeah, there we go. Thanks for watching. Check out the podcast, check out the TikTok, check out all the stuff. Subscribe to my Patreon if you don't mind, or buy me a coffee. The links should be in the description for both those things. But yeah, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.